This is not a tier list video. I love those videos. I love the folks who make them too. They're all creators I respect greatly. But if we're being honest, they never tell the full story. A gun can be objectively bad, and yet still a boatload of fun to play. Just ask anyone who mains Graviton Lance. We thank them for existing because sometimes it's not very clear who was dropped as a... So instead, I'm going to do a not tier list video where we sort out everything into 5 loose categories and talk about things in a more broad sense, which gives us more time to explore every weapon in a more complete way. From weapon feel to their place in the meta, we're going to go over everything with a fine-tooth comb and sort out who's packing and who's pretending. The last time I tried doing this, you all loved it so much that you made it my most successful video on the channel. So let's do it again. Today, I'm ranking every legendary and every exotic pulse rifle in the game in a not tier list for PvP. For those of you counting at home, that's 29 weapons. Everything was tested on console, PC, mouse and keyboard, and controller. We went hard, and whilst there's some things you'll disagree with, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by most of it. Let's start with the first category, the bad. I do not recommend these pulse rifles under any circumstance, unless you really like pain and looking at the state of the Canadian real estate market just wasn't enough for you. Kicking things off, we have the Hailing Confusion, the adaptive 390 RPM pulse rifle from Beyond Light sold through Varix on Europa. The aesthetics are kind of interesting, but the perk pool is just a bit rotten, I'm afraid. This is very clearly a PvE pulse rifle, and whilst it's nice to have some luxuries like target highlighting, I don't think that's enough to offset the horrible 52 recoil direction, the so-so feeling, and the mediocre perk package. The fourth column perks are all okay on their own, but none of them synergize at all with any third column option. It's incredibly role dependent just to be average at best, so for that reason, I'm out. Chattering Bone, a lightweight kinetic pulse rifle from the last Swiss raid, has been much improved since the start of the season when lightweights were buffed, but that's kind of where the headlines end, I'm afraid. I have the curated role and it was capable some of the time. Kill clip and high impact reserves do not synergize at all in practice, as I was killing well before hitting the bottom half of the mag. Then kill clip goes up and you kill even faster. When that happened, the gun did admittedly feel surprisingly good. But that's the curated role, which cannot be randomly acquired. Third column perks are full auto, outlaw, opening shot, and rangefinder, whilst fourth column perks are rampage, high impact reserves, head seeker, and under pressure. That's not a great selection for this archetype of pulse at all, and when paired with the gun's overall loose feeling and tinny aesthetics, I just can't see this hitting the spot for most. It certainly didn't for me. You remember Jurassic Green at all, the Festival of the Lost rapid fire pulse? No? Me neither, but allow me to reacquaint you. It's a solo rapid-fire pulse rifle created largely to exist between Darkest Before and the Grid Skipper, which are Arc and Void respectively. It has vastly inferior stats to every other rapid-fire pulse in the game, and it has a perk pool that makes very little sense in anything other than patrol PvE. This gun was so horrendously bad in our testing, and only one role felt even remotely okay. That role was Arrowhead, High-Cal, Rangefinder, and Adrenaline Junkie with a range masterwork. Arrowhead tamed the wayward 50 recoil direction, 50! To 80, but I still needed to use a counterbalance mod to make it feel usable. And even at that, we could not like this weapon. This pulse is unstable, has bad range and handling, and kicks like a mule on controller. So avoid this one at all costs. The final pulse rifle here is an exotic one, and it's collective obligation. If you can figure out how to make the perk activate in PvP, you're a better person than I could ever be, and I wish you all the best in life. For the rest of us, this is just an average as hell adaptive pulse with a cool aesthetic and a pay to win ornament that's almost mandatory to use well. An exotic with an unusable exotic perk goes straight to jail. So that's the bad. Only 5 out of 29 pulse rifles in total, so that's a pretty good sign. So let's get into the more esoteric options, the OK. These pulses are interesting, but have a few drawbacks that make you think twice. They're worth learning if you fancy a change of pace, but your mileage will definitely vary with all of them. OK weapons tend to have middling stat packages and are, on the whole, fairly role dependent, but they can do a job when asked. Like with New Purpose, which you may remember not too long ago I made a full review on, and to sum up, I just wasn't too impressed with it in PvP. Sure, it's a dungeon drop that can roll Desperado, but that perk isn't the scary must-have that it used to be. It's got great aesthetics and a great sight, but it feels like a damp towel right after a shower, which belies how hard it can actually hit. Its perk pool is heavily geared towards PvE, but in the right hands, Tunnel Vision and Desperado can do a number in a control lobby. I've got mixed feelings about this gun, but it does perform. Forge's Pledge was the subject of a video that I made a while ago where I said, if you're bad at Crucible, use this weapon for a certain playstyle. Adaptive pulses have long been a good training wheels option, and this continues that heritage. It's a much better feeling weapon on controller than M&K, and it has a very evenly split perk pool between PvE and PvP, but it's just not spectacular on any front, and Arrowhead Break is mandatory to tame that 51 recoil direction that makes this thing pull hard to the left at base. Its overall package is just sort of meh, but it's a good enough feeling weapon when it does work. Same goes for the Jian 7 rifle, which has the ability to roll scopes instead of barrels that change your zoom level. Really handy if you can get a low zoom and a high zoom scope and change between the two depending on the map that you have. But its limited perk pool is very average at best, and it just doesn't feel sticky on either input. It's an average pulse rifle with average performance and only 1 or 2 good PvP rolls. That being said, Arc 3.0 is around the corner, and it could be a surprise option that's worth keeping in mind. Legal Action 2 is a surprisingly good world drop. This high impact kinetic option isn't seen too much in the Crucible, which is odd because with its 22 zoom, it's a real outlier in this space. Messenger only has 20, and that's widely considered to be one of the best pulse rifles. In testing, the zoom made the weapon punch well above its weapon stats which suggest, and comfortably challenge snipers. Unfortunately, its perk pool is Jurassic Green levels of bad. It's not quite role dependent due to its base performance, but with perks like Underdog, Osmosis and Wellspring, it's clear that this was designed to be used in PvE. There is some interesting combinations like Moving Target and Frenzy, but it does require a skilled hand to make the best of it, if you can get it to drop. Seriously, I think I've gotten 2 all season, and maybe 5 total since it came out last year with Season of the Lost. A rare gem, if you can find one, and if you can tame it. And finally, we have a weapon that I've changed my mind on since the Exotic Not Tier List video, Graviton Lance. Yes, I know, I called this a really bad weapon back then, and I made a joke about it at the beginning of this video, and those opinions still hold true for mouse and keyboard. It's a horrible, flighty, loose-feeling weapon, and I don't recommend it at all. But on controller, this thing is stickier than syrup in the summer. Yes, you're forced into a passive playstyle because the 1 second time to kill means that you'll be outdueled by nearly everything else in the game, but it feels genuinely strong. Add a pulse rifle targeting mod and it will feel harder to miss than to hit. It's only in the OK section because of the playstyle requirements, and because it absolutely stinks on mouse. But for many of you who play controller and who do play passive in the Crucible anyways, you may want to consider this. I want to make it absolutely clear that with these weapons in the OK section, you're not likely to challenge the meta with ease. They're all weapons worth learning or incorporating into a build or a playstyle, or even just if you have nothing better laying around and you're wondering if they'll be any good. They'll do a job, and some of them can really turn a game or a moment on its head with the right hands. So far so good? I bet I've surprised you already with a couple of these, but if you're enjoying this video and liking what you've seen, consider hitting the magic buttons below. I appreciate you, and I'm sure you'll appreciate our next segment. Let's move on to the good stuff. Good weapons in this not tier list cinematic universe mean that these are the ones you're going to want to invest some time into. A little bit of time with any of these picks and you're going to find yourself seeing some wonderful returns. Sort of like Bitcoin, but without the volatile instability, the catastrophic environmental cost, and someone who hasn't showered lately promising you it's the future, bro. Let's start with Premonition, the high-impact pulse rifle that came from the moon. This one's always been a sleeper pick, and when you do get hit by one, you're tempted to look it up on Light.gg or D2 Gunsmith. And when you do, you'll be surprised to learn that it has some pretty interesting perk combinations like Surplus and Headseeker. The perk pool is highly compelling all round for PvP, with every 4th column picked except for maybe Thresh being a very good option. Slideways is the only weirdo in column 3, and then you have your standard barrel and mag perks. With 77 recoil direction and stats in line, if not slightly better than its counterparts, you're looking at a very good weapon here. It performed like it too in our testing. The only downside is that whilst farming it is possible on the moon via the Lectern of Enchantment, it's a little bit of a chore and there's 6 perks in each column. It'll be a while before you get what you want, but when you do, it's worth it. Last Perdition is also a good pulse rifle, maybe better than good despite being an adaptive frame pulse, but I find that its awkwardness with handling is just something that can't be ignored. which is a shame because this gun low-key has some of the best perks for PvP that you can put on a pulse rifle. Third column, Outlaw, Rangefinder, Firmly Planted, and Moving Target. Fourth column, Rampage, Kill Clip, Snapshot, and Zen Moment. And it comes with a selection of scopes that lets you tailor your weapon to your liking. Like the Gion 7 rifle, which feels very similar to this weapon, low zoom performance can be a hit or miss. I felt much more comfortable at range with higher zoom scopes, but the cost to handling does make it feel clunky at times. On both M&K and controller, there was always the feeling of leaving some performance on the table, but when it did click, especially with Kill Clip making it 2 burst, it clicked so well. It only drops from Dares of Eternity these days, but there's a high likelihood that you'll end up with a great roll. In what will probably surprise all of my PC audience, I'm putting Darkest Before at good and not great. Yeah, sorry folks, this one's a monster, but to get it to that point involves a lot of farming of the Prophecy Dungeon, and there's only really a couple of rolls that you're going to be satisfied with. Despite its heritage as a Trials of the Nine weapon, Darkest Before was reprised with a PvE slant in mind. One for All, Unrelenting, Wellspring, and arguably Rampage 2, these are all heavily PvE perks, and that gets doubled down with the existence of Overflow and Subsistence in column 3. On paper, this is not for PvP, but the base performance is really good regardless of what you have on it. My PvP roll of Small Bore, High Cal, Subsistence, and Rampage isn't perfect, but it has done and continues to do wonders against targets in 3s and 6s alike. On M&K, the gun is an absolute laser with very little screen shake or recoil when firing. It's a dueling monster. On controller, it was bouncing all over the place, far too much to extract consistent performance from it. For PvP, your perspective on this gun is wholly dependent on what input method you run and what role you were lucky enough to get. And whilst it's arguably a Trials contender, for those downsides I can't in good conscience place it higher than just good. Third Axiom is the next gun on this list, another Arc Energy Adaptive Pulse Rifle. It's our first playlist weapon to make this list, and yes, this means you've got 12 perks in each column to choose between. And they're all really kind of solid. There's nothing really special about how this gun performs. It is an adaptive pulse after all. It's all about the sights and the perks that make this weapon a super solid experience for everyone. If you've reset your Vanguard rank a few times and you get a drop of one of these, you might get up to 3 perks in one column. That's a huge win for me, worth picking up for Arc 3.0 alone. And finally for the good section, we have a weapon that I once called a future classic, the Grid Skipper. It hasn't aged as well as I would have liked it, but it is a solid enough gun. Grid Skipper has a decent perk pool, but the weapon feel and stat package are very good for a rapid fire pulse rifle. With 55 base recoil direction, you'll probably want Chambered Compensator, Extended Barrel, or Arrowhead Break to tame it since it does feel quite bouncy. Like Darkest Before, it feels a lot better in M&K than controller, and it is a little role dependent. But there's a few different options here that really transform this gun's output, like Firmly Planted and Heating Up in column 3, and Adrenaline Junkie or Multi-Kill Clip in column 4. Solid package all around, but nothing more. And that's officially 14 of the 29 pulse rifles we're covering, which means that over half of the legendary and exotic pulses in the game are kind of excellent right now. It's a grand time to be a pulse rifle enjoyer, and every single pulse from here on out is something worth a permanent slot in your inventory. The meta is defined by the most consistent options, and that's where this next batch comes in. The great pulse rifles are the ones that you can rely on time and time again, the ones that you can call upon not only to do a job, but to do it well. If you give them the time, they'll have a positive influence on your game and your outlook on life. They'll actually come back from the store with milk, and won't leave you hanging like your dad did. That's why you watch my videos, isn't it? If you value my services at suppressing your daddy issues or just want to see more videos like this, may I invite you to support the Patreon? It would mean a ton if you did. I'll even at you in the Discord personally. Thank you. Now, we begin our foray into this category with Sacred Provenance, the aggressive 4-burst pulse rifle from Garden of Salvation. I don't need to intro this at all. We know it's 2-burst capable, we know it can roll with Kill Clip, and yes, you have to play Garden to get it, blah 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 blah, insert funny joke here. It's a monster in the Crucible, but the reason it's not more than great is because it only has one specific role that's worth a damn. Arrowhead Break, Ricochet or High Cal, Rapid Hit, and Kill Clip. The rest of these perks are aggressively okay at best, and they don't transform the experience like Rapid Hit and Kill Clip do. They work and function well, but they don't give it the extra oomph like those two do. Great weapon, mediocre perk package. Next up is Cold Denial, one of the weirdest pulses in the game, but honestly it's such a breath of fresh air using this weapon. The highlight is the 14 zoom on this weapon, which is noticeably lower than every other pulse in this video, and crucially the same zoom level as a 140 RPM hand cannon, which means it's designed to be mid-range and to be used in those sorts of battles. And honestly, it can do it just fine. Being a high impact pulse means it has the damage to compete, but its stat package makes it a bit of a handful when the going gets tough. Luckily, with perks like Pulse Monitor, Feeding Frenzy, Eye of the Storm and Headseeker, you're able to stay in the fight for longer than you would most other pulses. Every perk except for Sympathetic Arsenal and Grave Robber is an interesting selection here, and a case can be made for any combination of them. It feels good, has great aesthetics, and a perk package to make up for its deficiencies. It requires a skilled hand to make the best of it, because that 14 zoom is both a blessing and a curse. Very well worth learning though, excellent pulse. Moving on to familiar territory, we have Syncopation coming in at great. If you missed my review, here's the lowdown. It's a craftable, adaptive pulse with a set of perks that allow you to build it for any situation you can reasonably think of. Hipfire Grip and Frenzy is a stupendously underrated combination, allowing you to 2-tap from the hip if you so desire. I'll save the long explanation for that review, but in short, this weapon punches well above its weight because of its feel and perk selection, and you can make it do whatever you want it to do. Stars and Shadow is often mentioned but never mained, which is a shame because it's amazing. It's just a fantastic high impact pulse rifle that rolls with every perk you can think of since it's a Crucible playlist weapon. Its sights are very good for dueling, its stat package is amongst the best of the high impacts, and generally speaking, you can't go wrong with many of the perks, except for Sympathetic Arsenal, Underdog and Genesis. Outside of that, this gun makes use of everything you roll with it. As of the making of this video, the drops are pretty rare. I was mostly getting other playlist weapons from the Crucible, and from Shaxx himself. But with a couple of Crucible resets, you'll be able to get multiple perks per column, which greatly helps the grind to get your god roll. At the end of the day, it's a high impact. It's gonna perform. Cannot recommend this gun enough, especially if you're a casual Crucible player and are looking for a pulse to learn high impacts with. The Time Worn Spire is a name that you've not heard of in a long time, but it's alive and well. Variable scopes leading up to 23 zoom, a very interesting set of Iron Banner perks with massive boost to stats at the cost of others, and a love it or hate it feel and aesthetic have certainly left an imprint on discerning pulse rifle mains. This thing just seems to work better than it has any right to, even with its 60 recoil direction, which makes the use of the counterbalance mod all but mandatory. This is one of those weapons where feel triumphs all, and for whatever reason, when I pick this weapon up, I'm doing far better than I should. If your scope pushes it to 19 zoom or more, you're going to love this weapon. A little less than that and your experience won't be as jovial. Great weapon, roll dependent as hell, and really up to the user as to what they want from it. Sort of like getting a custom suit made. No matter how you make it, it'll be better than anything else in your wardrobe. If you're a fan of Cool Guy, then you'll know that the Ogma PR6 is just all kinds of interesting. 19 zoom right off the bat, lightweight archetype which doesn't require you to be perfect to hit that optimal TTK, and a set of perks that lean PvE but have a good amount of utility in PvP. It feels amazing to use, a really stable experience out of the box on M&K and controller alike. The 55 recoil direction might seem a little worrying on paper, but honestly it feels very comfortable on this lightweight. The perk pool isn't outright geared towards slaying, but for improving your builds, which is a fresh take on things. Demolitionist and Adrenaline Junkie rolling in separate columns is absolutely stellar, but you can opt for Wellspring instead if you prefer energy regen across all abilities. If not, Perpetual Motion is here for passive stat boosts, and Heating Up is always a welcome addition for pulse rifles. But even without those rolls, it just feels so nice to use, and for that reason, it automatically goes to great. It's not placed higher due to the fact that it's a world drop and upstaged by something arguably better. The Horror's Least is not a new gun, and yet it remains somewhat of an unknown quantity. It was recently reissued with Season of the Haunted as a Nightfall weapon, and has been available for 1 week total as of the making of this video. Despite this, it's already left quite the impression. It's a fantastic feeling pulse rifle for all aspects of PvP, in part due to its very good stability and above average aim assist. Being an arc rapid fire pulse, the natural comparison is Dark as Before, and whilst it's marginally better from a statistical comparison, the real pudding is in this weapon's perk pool. In column 3, steady hands, zen moment, under pressure, perpetual motion, compulsive reloader, and heating up. In column 4, kill clip, focus fury, high impact reserves, turnabout, vorpal, and frenzy. This gun is beautifully suited to all aspects of the game, and when you play around with this weapon, pay close attention to just how good this thing works. And since it's a Nightfall weapon, there's an adapter version to boot. This is a must-have weapon, especially for ARC 3.0. And finally, Outbreak Perfected. No introduction required. It's f***ing Outbreak Perfected. It got buffed, which means this weapon is no longer just the weapon you use to make you a better player. It's the gun you can use to make you the best player in the lobby. Period. The zero recoil nature is still present on both input methods, and a little tip for you. Radiance applies to the nanites that spawn on a headshot. Yeah, this thing is very, very nasty. It's not elite, because to be elite, it should be a contender for absolute best in slot. And that honor doesn't go to Outbreak. Oh no, I don't think you're ready for what does. And those are the great pulse rifles covered. Pick any of these up and you're going to fall in love with using pulses in the Crucible. But if you want to become a menace, a genuine problem to all you know and love, it's time to sit up. It's time for the best pulse rifles in the game, bar none. It's time for the Elite 7. Ladies, gentlemen, and other, this is it. These are the status quo. Some you know, some you looked over. All of them are lethal. Since its release in the Witch Queen, the Peace of Mind has been absolutely terrorizing players left, right, and center, especially in trials where its 20 zoom makes it a noticeable outlier and a performative monster, which we covered in our review that garnered 250,000 views. As with a few of the weapons in the latter stages of this video, Peace of Mind is fully craftable with a perk pool that not only completely erases its main shortcomings as a rapid-fire pulse, but also accentuates its strengths to make it a consistency monster. The feel of this weapon is greatly aided by that 20 zoom, which helps make recoil more manageable and pushes this weapon into high-impact scout rifle and sniper rifle territory. And with longer range maps becoming more common in the Crucible rotation, this is a true jack of all trades for the long range, mid range, and close range metas. It's a permanent fixture in my inventory, and if you haven't crafted one yourself, you need to fix that right now. It drops from the war table and runic chests in PsyOps Battlegrounds, and it's one of the best primaries in the game. Period. To go along with that, another explicitly PvE pulse rifle is one of the most underrated picks for PvP, Insidious. This is a raid weapon, meaning not only is it fully craftable, if you grind for the patterns from Valve the Disciple, but the master version of the raid drops adepts for this too. As an aggressive frame 450 RPM, it's a neutral 2-burst optimal, which is greatly aided by perks like Rapid Hit, Heating Up, Rampage, and Adrenaline Junkie. Like we said in our review of this weapon, it's got perks that work extremely well for both PvE and PvP, and it's only set to get even stronger when ARC 3.0 launches. Demolitionist and Adrenaline Junkie is a role worth noting. Its base stability, range, recoil direction, and airborne effectiveness are all a step up over Sacred Provenance, and it has a variety of roles to give you a better experience. But not a single specific combination is required to slay out, and that is the hallmark of a truly special weapon. Surprising absolutely no one, the Messenger is back near the top here. The de facto high impact king, Messenger's base stats are a noticeable level above all of its counterparts, which is then doubled down upon when an Adept version is masterworked with an Adept mod in tow. The 60 recoil direction is not ideal, but with so much time to correct between bursts, this isn't as big an issue in practice. Boasting perk choices like Desperado, Kill Clip, and now Perpetual Motion with Alacrity for when your fire team is dead, there is no better legendary pulse rifle for the competitive PvP modes. It's just a cut above everything else, and if there was such a thing as S+ tier, it would be firmly in it. As of the making of this video, it's unobtainable, but rest assured that that will not be the case for very long, as Bungie like to rotate loot pools quite often. Our final legendary pulse in this list is the BXR Battler 55, which has proven to be more than just a nostalgic party trick in the last 6 months that it's been out. True to its Halo roots, this gun has perfect hipfire accuracy and a scope that just feels right. it's an absolute stat monster as well, with better range, stability, handling, reload, aim assist, and zoom than its direct slot rival, the Ogma PR6. At 20 zoom, it's blessed with Peace of Mind's party trick that allows you to challenge anything from anywhere no matter what the distance is. And the perfect tipfire accuracy also means that you can surprise the sidearms and shotgunners as well. This weapon is also blessed with an absolutely perfect perk pool as well. When Rangefinder is your least favorite choice in the entire pool, you know you've got a winner on your hands. But like the Insidious, you don't need any of them for this gun to work incredibly well. This is a special weapon on MNK, but a damn near perfect one on controller, just like in Halo. They did this thing justice, and I love it to bits. I was initially going to put Vigilance Wing in Great, but after just half a match reacquainting myself with it, I knew that this was an elite weapon. It's a weird one, 530 RPM, 5 burst pulse. Nothing in the game replicates that, and nothing also replicates its sheer ease of use. In 2 bursts of 10 bullets, you only need 9 to hit, and only 7 of those 9 to crit to hit the reported 0.77 seconds time to kill. And if that's not an option for you, the 1.27 second body shot time to kill is one of the fastest in the game, and certainly the best for any pulse rifle. It looks great, feels great, and even though it doesn't have any special perks and its exotic perk is kind of meh, it doesn't need anything. It's a beautifully handled weapon that will surprise you in just how good it is. I know it's been a while for a few of you since you last used it. Give it another go, trust me. Once again, surprising absolutely nobody, No Time to Explain is elite. It's been enjoying somewhat of a resurgence in the Crucible, as its exotic perk helps to deal a bit more damage in a meta where everyone, and I quite literally mean everyone, either has an overshield, a restoration mod, or a party trick that lets them regen health. The exotic perk is Time Slip, where after 10 crit shots a little black hole appears and fires towards your targets with you, like a sentry gun, and for all intents and purposes, a second gun in the fight. This makes it incredibly hard to duel against, and in a Trials meta where you will peek someone, shoot them, and they'll dip to get restoration going, its uptime ends up being really high. The longer the fight goes on, the more it plays to this weapon's strengths. Add that to the fact that it's high impact, has amazing sights, and feels generally fantastic to use, it's an easy inventory lock for me. But despite this, it's not my number one pick these days. That honor goes to a weapon I wrote off a long time ago. A weapon I called so incredibly bad that it was one of the first weapons mentioned in the Exotic Not tier list. Oh, how the difference one patch makes. Because the last elite pulse rifle, and quite possibly the best one, is Bad Juju. Bad Juju's got plenty of eliteness. String of Curses is 4 perks rolled into one: Subsistence, Rampage, Thresh, and Full Auto. The issue was that its damage profile before made it hard to get going, requiring perfect bursts to get a kill. It always felt like trying to do a steep hill start with the Citroen 2CV. But Bad Juju classifies as a 450 RPM and was subject to the lightweight pulse rifle buff, boosting its damage profile. Suddenly the Citroen became a Bugatti. Lightweights are now pretty competitive. Their time to kill didn't change, but their forgiveness did, and once you get that first kill, it's damn near impossible to not get that second, and then the third. And all the while, your ammo is being refunded and your super regen is getting greater with each stack of String of Curses. This is a 6v6 player's dream weapon. You can wreak absolute havoc on a lobby, and nobody will know what hit them. In 3v3, it's still a fine weapon, and if you can get some kills, it will help you get your super just a little bit faster. And to boot, it's Bad Juju. The sights, the aesthetics, and the feel of this weapon are just so right. 85 recoil direction, 77 stability, 56 handling, and the catalyst keeps String of Curses up for longer. When you get going, you can't stop, and that's why it's elite. All it needed was a small tweak to its damage profile, and now it's an absolute peach. If you're interested in seeing a full Bad Juju review, comment down below and sign it off with your favorite fruit. It is the summer after all, and if you see this video in not summer, well, eat more fruit, it's good for you. And there you have it, every single pulse rifle classified in a not tier list. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I was right about your favorites. As ever, a massive thank you to all my patrons for sticking with me and making this video possible. This one was fun to make. I'm Ascended Nomad, and I'm your Crucible Doctor. See you next time.